These wide fender flares are for those of you that have a 1997 to 2006 TJ that are looking to replace those factory fender flares with ones that are going to be a little bit wider to cover a wider tire or a wheel with a little bit less back spacing. In some places you'll need a wider flare in order to remain legal on the road, and in some cases you just want that extra tire coverage to keep the tires from throwing junk up on the side of the Jeep. Whatever your reasoning is, these are going to be otherwise very factory looking flares, just a little bit wider. These are going to be a pretty easy installation, and I'm going to show you how to install them in just a second. So as I mentioned, these are going to be very similar to a factory flare, just a little bit wider. A lot of other aftermarket flares will have a lot of other stuff going on. You can find rivet style or pocket style. You can find them that are wider or narrower, flat flares, or sometimes even metal ones. So a ton of different choices out there. But if you're a big fan of that factory styling, you just want a little bit more tire coverage, this is absolutely the way to go. It's going to be nice and simple. It's going to install very easily, and it's going to give you exactly what you're looking for. These flares are also very reasonably priced, at least in my opinion. These are going to be right around that $130 mark, and you're going to get not only the 4 main flares that you see, but also the flare extensions that go directly behind the front tires. So if you're somebody who currently has those installed, you want to replace those as well, this kit is going to include it. Another nice thing that this kit includes is all of the hardware that you need to get these installed. The installation of this, again, is very, very simple, but if you have an older TJ, and let's be honest, even the newer TJs are getting a little bit older, you may have a little bit of rust on your Jeep and you may need to change out some of the hardware in order to get the new flares installed. The good news is this kit includes all of the hardware that you need to get that done. So between the quality, the fit, the fact that these are just a simple factory style but wider flare that comes with all the hardware, make it very worth the cost for these flares. I said a couple times now that the install is pretty straightforward. Let me show you how to do it. So for our installation, we used an 8mm socket on a 3/8 impact. We also needed a 10mm socket to remove the turn signal and a couple of adapters because that was a smaller 1/4-inch drive socket. So the first step in this installation is going to be, of course, removing the factory fender flares from the Jeep, and the first step in doing that is removing the socket from this turn signal. And I do that first so I don't forget about it later, otherwise you get to the last bolt on the flare, go to pull it off the Jeep, and you can pull that wire a little bit taut. So just give that socket a 1/4 turn here. It'll release out of the housing, you can see that here, and we'll just tuck that away in the corner, again, just so we don't damage any of the wiring or the bulb. Now we're free to remove all of the bolts that are holding the fender flare into place. So the way these flares are held on is by bolting through the flare into a nutsert that's in the body of the Jeep. And this is going to be the most difficult part of the uninstallation and installation for some of you that have older TJs, and let's face it, even the newest TJ is a little bit older these days. If you have some rust on your Jeep and that bolt is rusted into the nutsert, when you turn the bolt, it can spin the whole nutsert and make things very difficult to get them apart. You may end up having to cut off some of the bolt heads, drill out some of the nutserts, reinstall new nutserts. That's all stuff that is a possibility for you depending on how your Jeep is, how much rust it has on it, and how easily things come apart for you. What I will say is go ahead and spray everything with a good penetrating oil well before you get started. Maybe spray it a couple of times. If you can get to the back side of some of these, spray that. Some of them are captured, but some you can get to the back side of. Spray everything good. That will make it as easy as possible for you, but do know that if you have some rust, you may end up having to cut and drill out some nutserts. All of that being said, we've recently replaced everything on this Jeep, so this should be nice and easy for us. We're going to be using a pneumatic impact here, a pneumatic socket driver. That's just because it's nice and small, it can get up in these tight places, and we're gonna buzz all of these bolts out to get the fender flare off the Jeep. So the first step in the installation of your new flares is to install the turn signal into the flare, and it goes in the same way it came out of your factory flare. It's just going to snap into place like so, and then that small clip nut will go on right over top. Now that that's done, we can get the flare installed on the Jeep. Get the flare on the Jeep, you have a couple of indexing pins here that go into these holes in the body. And then we can go ahead and reinstall all of our factory hardware. Once we have all the bolts tightened down on the main flare there, we can move to the smaller mini flare that goes right here. As you can see, our Jeep didn't have the factory mini flare in this location. Some of you might also be missing that piece. Sometimes people just take them off because they don't like the look of it, or maybe you had a rocker guard installed at one time that covered this area. Whatever the case may be, this kit includes all 6 flares, so we're going to install all 6 of them. We're going to use the same factory style hardware that we used to hold this flare into place, and these 3 nuts are here to bolt this up. Now we can move on to the flare on the rear here, and this is going to install in the same way that the front flare did. The only difference is back here, of course, no turn signal. So we're gonna hold this up to the Jeep, probably get a couple of these upper bolts started by hand just to hold everything in place, then work from the front to the back, putting all the bolts in and tightening them down. Once you have all 3 pieces installed on one side, you can go ahead and move on to the other side and do the exact same process, and that'll finish up the install. So if you are looking for a new set of fender flares that are going to look pretty much like factory ones, just a little bit of wider for some more tire coverage, I would recommend this option, and you can find it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.